Figures of speech. This presentation is prepared by Mrs. Sujata Ali, lecturer in Dharampet, MP Deo Memorial Science College, Nagpur.
Figures of speech. A figure of speech is a poetic device which consists in the use of words and phrases in such a manner so as to make the meaning more pointed and clear and the language more graphic and vivid. Figures are also called images, for in them one thing is represented in the image of another. According to Bain, it is a form of expression that intentionally deviates from the ordinary mode of speech for the sake of more powerful, pleasing, or distinctive effect. It is a pictorial or poetic language. But it is a mistake to think of figures of speech as simply ornaments of language. They are a part and parcel of the human language in moments of excitement. When the emotions of an individual are stirred, man instinctively tends to express himself through the use of figurative language. The world of nature is an inexhaustible storehouse of figures of speech or images as they are also called, and poets and writers have always drawn freely from their storehouse. Figures have been used by poets to decorate the language and to make it more vivid and pictorial, to increase its force and effectiveness, and to communicate their meaning more lucidly and clearly. By increasing the beauty of language, the use of figures of speech provides great aesthetic satisfaction to its readers. So, let us commence this presentation by explaining a few figures of speech in more detail. Thank you and happy learning.
The first figure of speech under discussion is a simile. The word simile comes from the Latin word similis, like, and means likeness. It is an expression of likeness between two different objects or events. It consists in placing two different things side by side and comparing them with regard to some quality common to them. In other words, there are two essential elements in a simile. First, the two objects or events compared must be different in kind. Secondly, the point of resemblance between the two different objects or events compared must be clearly brought out. Such words of comparison as like, as, so, etc. are always used. For example, he was as brave as a lion. Here we can clearly see that the man has been compared to be as brave as a lion. Second example, he is as funny as a barrel of monkeys. And third example, they fought like cats and dogs. He is as strong as an ox. Here too you see the strength of the man is compared to that of an ox. So you see there are two different objects, that is, one is the man and the other is an ox, and what is being compared between the two of them is their strength. The man's strength is as much as the strength of an ox. So when this kind of comparison is made between two objects which however has one quality in common, the figure of speech is said to be a simile. Moving on. The second figure of speech that we are going to discuss today is a metaphor. A metaphor is an implied simile. The word metaphor comes from the Greek meta, meaning over, and phero, meaning carry. It means literally a carrying over, and by this figure of speech, a word is transferred or carried over from the object to which it belongs to another in such a manner that a comparison is implied though not clearly stated. Thus, a metaphor is an implied simile. Like a simile, it does not state that one thing is like another or acts as another, but it takes that for granted and proceeds as if the two things were one. Look at the example that is given on slide number 3. The sun was a gleaming pearl. Here, the figure of speech is obviously a metaphor because the sun has been implicitly compared or indirectly compared to a pearl. The next example, my baby brother is a cute little teddy bear. Now here, the baby brother is being compared to be as cute as the little teddy bear, but the poet is not making use of the word as. He is indirectly implying or saying that his baby brother is a cute little teddy bear. So again, the figure of speech will be a metaphor. Let me also pose a few more examples. The camel is the ship of the desert. And another example, he was a lion in the fight. Both these sentences also depict the metaphor. A person to the next figure of speech, which is a personification. Personification is a figure of speech in which inanimate objects and abstract ideas or qualities are spoken of as if they were persons or human beings. For example, opportunity knocks at the door but once. We all know that opportunity is an abstract idea, an inanimate object, but it is shown to be performing the human activity of knocking at the door. Hence, the figure of speech is a personification. The second sentence, death lays his icy hands on kings. Again, death is a personified idea, but it is performing the human action of placing his cold hands on the king. So, the figure of speech here too is a personification. The flame of the candle danced in the dark. Now here, the flame is personified to be performing the human action of dancing, and hence the figure of speech is a personification. The leaves danced their way through the lawn. Very clear. Leaves are shown to be performing the human action of dancing in the lawn, and hence the figure of speech is a personification. The angry sore was visible. Sore means a wound where you have got hurt. Okay, a wound is appearing clearly. Now the wound is personified to be shown as if it is angry. It is getting angry on someone. Getting angry is a human quality given to an abstract idea, that is the soul. Hence, the figure of speech here too is a personification. The next figure of speech in discussion is an apostrophe. An apostrophe is a direct address to the dead, to the absent, or to a personified object or idea. This is a special form of personification. Let us look at a few examples. O wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's being. Here you see that the poet is directly talking to the west wind. He is directly addressing the west wind, telling it that it is the breath of the season of autumn. So when you see the poet directly addressing a personified idea, the figure of speech will be an apostrophe. The second sentence, O solitude, where are the charms that sages have seen in thy face? In this poem, we see the poet directly talking to solitude. Solitude means loneliness. The poet in this particular poem has been abandoned, left alone on an island, but staying alone in this island for a long period of time makes him feel extremely lonely and sad. He is not at all happy living alone. Therefore, he starts talking to his own loneliness and asks loneliness, where are the charms, where is the beauty that sages, that wise old men have seen in its face? In whose face? In the face of solitude. So you see, the poet is directly talking to solitude, to his loneliness, and it is also a personified idea, and the figure of speech is obviously an apostrophe. Moving on, the next figure of speech is a hyperbole. The word hyperbole, hyper meaning beyond, balo meaning to throw. Literally, a throwing beyond means exaggeration. This figure of speech consists in representing things as much greater or smaller than they really are, with the intention of producing a more striking effect than just making a plain statement. Look at the slide on the left hand side, the first slide. She cried so long that she made a lake. Now here, obviously the figure of speech is an exaggeration, so which is a hyperbole. The little girl kept crying for such a long time that the tears that kept pouring down, flowing down her eyes, produced a lake in front of her, which we all know is not possible, isn't it? So it's an exaggerated statement, and hence the figure of speech is a hyperbole. Look at the other example. I am so tired I could sleep for a year. Practically, it's not possible for any individual to sleep for one entire year. By this, the poet wants to emphasize the fact that the man is extremely tired, so tired that he feels that he can sleep for a whole year. Exaggerated statement, and hence the figure of speech again is a hyperbole. Moving on, the next figure of speech under consideration is the antithesis. When two opposite ideas or terms representing them are brought together, it is called an antithesis. Let us look at a few examples. The open window shuts with a bang. Obviously, open and shut are opposite words brought together in one sentence for creating a greater poetic effect, and hence the figure of speech is an antithesis. The next example: they pass their life of days and nights and live for centuries in the forest. Here too, opposite words days and nights have been brought together in one sentence for increasing the lyrical quality of the line. So, since they are opposite words placed next to each other, the figure of speech will be an antithesis. Her questions found their own answers. Obviously, questions and answers are also opposite words placed in one sentence. Hence, the figure of speech here too is an antithesis. A very important figure of speech that we are going to discuss now is the synecdoche. In this figure of speech, there is a substitution of a part for the whole, or the whole is used to designate a part. Let us look at the examples in order to better understand how we identify this particular figure of speech. Give us today our daily bread. Now, when we say give us today our daily bread, here the word bread represents the whole, that is the food. Bread is only a part. Okay, when we are praying to God, asking Him to give us today our daily bread, we don't literally mean that we want only bread to eat morning, noon and night, but it stands for the whole, that is the food. We want God to provide us with food all through the day. We don't want to go to bed on an hungry stomach. So instead of saying food, we are making use of the word bread. So clearly you see it is a part which represents the whole. Hence the figure of speech will be a synecdoche. Look at the next example now. USA has won the gold medal. Now, we often hear this kind of a term being used during Olympics and other games, international games or games that are played on the national level. Here, you notice or you also know there is an individual or a team that has won the medal, isn't it? Hence, the whole of the USA is used to represent a part. That is, it might be the individual who is born in USA, or it may be a group, a team who has won the match for USA. So over here you notice it is the whole that is spoken for the part, and hence the figure of speech being used here is also a synecdoche. The next figure of speech is a very interesting and an easy one, which is an alliteration. Alliteration means using the same first letter or sound in a group of words. If a consonant sound is repeated in quick succession at the beginning of words, it is called an alliteration. Let us look at the examples given below. She sells seashells on the seashore. Here you see there is a beautiful representation of the letter S, which is repeated pleasingly in order to make the sentence sound more musical. So, the figure of speech here is an alliteration. Second example, the terrible tiger tore the towel. Here you see there is a continuous repetition of the consonant letter T in terrible, tiger, tore and towel. So again the figure of speech will be an alliteration. Busy buzzing, the bee behaved beautifully. Here you will see or notice that there is a continuous repetition of the consonant letter B. Hence, here too, figure of speech will be an alliteration. The next figure of speech is an onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia means the formation of words that are like natural sounds. The sound of the word suggests the meaning, that is, the sense of the word. Here, the words express the sounds. Let us look at the examples now. The clanging pots and pans woke the baby. This is exactly the sound that is created when pots and pans fall down on the ground, hit the ground. The sound that is produced is a clanging sound. So the sound also is clanging, and the word used to express the sound is also clanging. Therefore, when the word is expressing the sound, the figure of speech will become an onomatopoeia. Next example, the wolves howled at the moon. We all have heard the wolves howling in some horror movies or sinister movies or plots that we have seen, isn't it? So when the wolf takes out the deep throated noise from its throat, the sound that comes out of its mouth is the sound of howling. So again, the word howl is expressed in the sound howling. Hence, the figure of speech will again become an onomatopoeia. The bees buzzed around the flowers. This is something we all have experienced in our lifetime, one time or the other. We have noticed the bees when they come buzzing towards us. We sort of tend to get scared as well, where it's going to bite us. So that buzzing sound that comes out of the bee, that is produced by the bee itself, is also the word buzz, and hence the sound is expressed in the word buzzing. So the figure of speech again becomes an onomatopoeia. Moving on, repetition. Very easy again. Repetition is a literary device in which a word or a phrase is repeated 2 or more times. For example, the rabbit ran round and round the tree. Here you see the word round, round is repeated twice. Next example, the fox jumped once, the fox jumped twice, and finally gave up trying. So the fox jumped is a phrase which is repeated twice for creating a greater poetic effect, for emphasizing a particular statement. So the figure of speech again becomes a repetition. Moving on, paradox. A paradox means a statement seemingly absurd or self-contradictory, though possibly true. Paradox means using contrasting words to suggest a well-founded idea. Let us look at the example to better understand what a paradox means. There is no one so poor as a wealthy miser. Look at that sentence. There is no one so poor as a wealthy miser. Now, for a moment, it makes us stop and think, how can a wealthy man be poor? Wealthy means rich. How can a rich man be poor? But what type of a rich man is shown to be poor? The rich man who is a miser. Miser means who is stingy, who has a lot of wealth but who does not want to spend his money. So what is the use of having so much of wealth when you do not want to spend it? In that case, you are no better than a poor man, isn't it? Hence, when this kind of a sentence is written, the figure of speech automatically becomes a paradox. The next example, my weakness is my strength. Isn't it something to wonder about? How can my weakness be my strength? It can. Just give it a thought. Supposing if I say, it is my weakness to always tell the truth, never to lie. If that's my weakness, definitely it is going to be my strength. So hence, the figure of speech used here will be a paradox. I must be cruel to be kind. Moving on, transferred epithet. Epithet means an adjective and to transfer means to change of the place. In this figure of speech, an epithet or a qualifying adjective is sometimes transferred from a person to an object. For example, the ploughman homeward ploughs his weary way. Ploughman means the farmer. A farmer has finished working in the fields throughout the day. He is extremely tired and is walking back home, feeling very tired. Now, weary means tired. Okay. Now, here, weary is the epithet. It is the adjective, the quality. Now, who is actually tired over here? It is the ploughman. But what has the poet or the writer done? He has shifted the quality, the epithet weary, from the ploughman to the way, the path on which the farmer, the ploughman, is walking. So the epithet or the quality has been transferred from the person to the object, and hence the figure of speech is a transferred epithet. The next example, he tossed from side to side on his sleepless bed. Now, this is something that happens with all of us at some point in time. When we are trying to sleep and not able to get sleep, we keep changing our position on the bed. That is when we are sleepless. Is the bed sleepless or am I sleepless? I am sleepless. Okay, here the man is sleepless. So when he is sleepless, what is he doing? He is turning over again and again on the bed. But what has the poet done? What has the writer done? He has transferred the quality or the epithet sleepless from the man to the bed. So again, the epithet or the adjective has been transferred from the person to the object, and so the figure of speech here too is a transfer. Moving on, interrogation, or as we might call it also a rhetorical question. Interrogation is asking of the question, not for getting an answer, but to make a point more effectively. This figure of speech is also known as a rhetorical question because a question is asked for the sake of rhetorical effect. It is used to make a forceful statement. Let us look at the examples. If winter comes, can spring be far behind? Do you want to get kicked out of my class? If you wrong us, shall we not revenge? Now all these are questions that are being asked, not to expect an answer. The answer has already been assumed. We know what the answer is, but it is only being put in the form of the question in order to make it into a more effective or a forceful statement. When this is done by the writer or the poet, we call it making use of the figure of speech, interrogation. The next figure of speech under consideration is the inversion. Inversion means change of word order. In inversion, the usual word order is changed for the purpose of poetic effect. For example, the whole of earthly life you have depicted. The correct prose order for this would be, you have depicted the whole of earthly life. The next sentence, my pleasant thing in ashes lie. The correct word order of the sentence should be, my pleasant thing lies in ashes. And the last sentence, such wonderful players are they that no one can beat them. The correct word order would be, they are such wonderful players that no one can beat them. So in this manner, when the word order of a sentence is changed for the purpose of having or getting a greater poetic effect, the figure of speech will be an inversion. So, my dear students and friends, this particular presentation, I tried to cover all the basic and important figures of speech. I hope you enjoyed watching my presentation and your ideas about the different figures of speech that we make use of in our day-to-day conversation has also become more clear and vivid. I hope that you would like and subscribe to my channel. It's by my name, Sujata Ali. Let's learn to love English. Do subscribe and like my channel. Thank you and happy learning.